Hey y'all, Ryan Sprague here. As you all know, the Somewhere in the Skies podcast is always free to consume, but it isn't free to create. That's why I've started the Somewhere in the Skies Patreon campaign. On a monthly basis, you give what you think the show is worth. You'll be helping the show continue, grow, and to be something truly communal. And remember, there are rewards for each level of contribution, and the list is only growing. So please, help Somewhere in the Skies now by becoming a patron. To contribute and to learn more, visit www.patreon.com/somewhereskies. Thank you for your support. And now, on with the show. Today on the show, we have space historian Amy Shira Teitel.
What people always forget, and you, of course, would not forget this, is that, like, when you're looking at exoplanets, you're also looking back in time, right? So we have to find life on that planet in the moment where it exists, because it might be that we're seeing it after a mass extinction.
This is Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague.
Welcome to Somewhere in the Skies. I'm your host, Ryan Sprague. This week, I pull a wonderful conversation out of the vault over at Rogue Planet, featuring author and space historian Amy Shira Teitel. Amy is a Canadian-American author, popular science writer, spaceflight historian, YouTuber, and podcaster. She's best known for writing the book Breaking the Chains of Gravity, and for her YouTube channel, Vintage Space. Today we talk all about how she first got interested in space history, her thoughts on NASA versus private space exploration, and, of course, we chat a little about UFOs and some strange cases she's come across in her research. I hope you enjoy. Amy, thanks for joining us today. I know it's early, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries at all. I'm very happy to be here, happy to be talking to you.
So, we always kind of have to start with the origin story. Some of our listeners might not be familiar with your work. When did your interest in space history and exploration, when did it really start?
It's really too bad that this is audio, because I have a great visual for this question, because it is actually my most frequently asked question. Because, I'm a girl, so why do I know about space? I was 7, and I think, I can't remember if I was assigned it or if I picked it, but I did a project on Venus for my second grade science project. And, you have those little kids' space books that give you, like, cartoons of planets and facts and stuff, and I was just obsessed with the fact that Venus, you could see it in the sky, but it was like the Earth turned inside out and spinning backwards and on fire. And I was like, that's so cool. So I had all these books, and in one of them there was a little cartoon of 2 men standing on the moon in front of a lunar module. And I was just like, oh, wait. People walked on the moon? Why was I not informed? Because I'm from Canada, where there's no NASA, and we don't talk about NASA and astronauts all the time. So I just became obsessed with, like, wanting to know how and why they did it. And like any big technology rooted in Cold War, the answer gets bigger and bigger the more you ask. So it's just this, like, childhood fascination about Apollo that's kind of led me into doing this professionally.
That's awesome. I couldn't think of a better origin story.
I'm the luckiest nerd ever. Like, I just get to be, I actually want to get new business cards printed that just say professional space history nerd. Because that's the most apt description of what I do.
Right. Yeah. And you really have carved a place for yourself in sort of this space history niche. And I guess sort of run us through how that started and how it was sort of navigating your way, which through what I assume, kind of like the UFO field, is definitely considered a boys' club.
Definitely a boys' club. I sort of started by accident in a lot of ways. I finished my master's degree and hated it. I hated the, I don't know your thoughts on academia, but I just was not a fan of like trying to write things to impress an old guard of men who weren't really interested in space stuff, but that's what I self-specialized in my history of science fields. So I actually moved to Phoenix for personal reasons, not for work, because there's nothing really in Phoenix for me. But I started a blog as like a way to play around with the space history stuff that I was still having so much fun with, just having finished my master's thesis and was just like so loving archives. And the plan was to like get a job for the year and then do a PhD and then be an academic, because I didn't know what else to do with this nerd love. But then the blog took off in like 4 months, and people started recirculating my articles and asking me to write for them directly. So it was really just kind of by accident that I became a writer, like a journalist, a space journalist with a concentration, I guess, if you will, in space history. And that ended up spinning off into the YouTube channel, because some people are visual and don't want to read. And then that took off because YouTube actually like took notice of me, and I've been working with them on some different projects over the years. And it's just been like literally throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And a lot of things seem to be sticking, and it's kind of amazing, and I'm super lucky about it. And then it is that super weird thing that like I am in this nebulous space where like as much as I research more, like I have a bookshelf that would rival most professors' offices, but because I'm not in the academic world, like the old guard of space history doesn't really like me because I don't do it the way that they do it.
Right.
But at the same time, I think it's so much more important to do things for like trade publications where people actually read it as opposed to not. So it is that weird thing where like, not only am I coming at this from an angle that, the people, the men that should be my peers don't really like, it's also the thing of like, I look much younger than I am, that people don't really believe that I do what I do. And like, I go to conferences and people are like, oh, so whose wife are you? And I'm like, no, I'm giving a talk. I will be standing next to a male friend, and then someone will turn to the gentleman and say, so what are you speaking on? And they'll say, well, I'm actually just here because I'm a fan. She's the one giving the talk. It's like, yeah, it is very, very weird, but I honestly just kind of like ignore the internet most days and like keep my head down and just like do my thing.
The old guard, while we take a lot from them and we sort of build off of that, you got to shake things up every once in a while, and you're definitely doing that. And you did mention your blog. Could you tell us a little about the blog and how Vintage Space came to be?
Yeah, Vintage Space is my blog and YouTube channel, and Vintage Space has had a few incarnations over the years. I'm so sad that PopSci just shut down its blog network one day, because it was really fun to blog at Popular Science. It just like people know that. They're like, oh, cool. And I'm like, yeah, doing the same thing on WordPress now, and people are like, oh, you're a blogger. It really just started out as like my little internet baby to like engage in my own nerd stuff and just kind of have a space to play around with ideas and share things and just kind of work on my own writing style. And it's evolved over the time. And like, yeah, it's a little over 6 years old, which feels weird to have a blog birthday, but I do track its growth. But that's the blog story. It's not a very interesting story now that I say it out loud. I started a blog.
We all have, but you really did sort of blow up, and like you said, the YouTube channel just racks up so many hits, and
yeah. The YouTube channel, I literally started this because NASA has so many good pictures and people don't necessarily want to read a 1,500 or 2,000 word blog post, which is like coming right out of academia. That's how long they used to be. So I decided to see if I could do, so much. And like I wasn't getting paid when they were that long either. That's the worst part. So I started doing like VO of just like images and like playing around in what's the iMovie, like these videos are horrible. And like, I didn't know how to be on camera. And then I like gradually got more comfortable with like being a face, but I was still reading. It was just like, it was so awkward. And over the years, I've just kind of realized that if I write the blog post before I do the video, then all the ideas are in my brain, and then I can just talk at my camera, and it's much more candid and much more natural. And as soon as I started doing that, and also got like a real camera and lighting, that really helps. Yeah, it's just like this became an avenue that people really like. And that's awesome. I wrote it down somewhere on a card over on my messy desk, but like I hit 100,000 subscribers recently.
Wow.
Which is awesome. That's like a huge milestone for like a tiny little, you know, it's just me, you know, on a day-to-day basis, like doing this in my apartment. And I think I gained something like 68,000 subscribers this year to hit that mark. I'm like, that's, when I stopped and looked at that, I was like, holy crap, that is a lot of people in 1 year. Because I've been doing this channel for 4 years, like off and on. But since I really dedicated time to it, like, holy crap, people like this. So it's awesome. It's like so fun. And it means that like my favorite is when I have like the nicest audience. There's not a lot of awful comments considering it's YouTube. And people like leave me these really long comments of like, oh, I remember watching this mission launch. I was 6 years old and my dad let me stay home from school. And it's really cute.
Well, yeah.
That's such a nice audience.
Yeah, I can only, well, in your passion comes through the videos, and I think people appreciate that too, especially in what, you know, is usually a field that can get stuffy at times, I would assume, with the historical aspect. But yeah, like you mentioned, you know, I heard a lot of people talking about where they were when this gentleman first landed. We unfortunately lost one of our greatest, John Glenn, and you put together a really nice video on your YouTube, Godspeed John Glenn, a unique American hero. Do you care to comment at all about John Glenn and sort of like what he possibly meant to you in your research?
Yeah, John Glenn is such an interesting figure because I never met him. I should say that right up front. But he's such an interesting figure because he's so iconic of that era, and it's an era that people sort of hate now because it was, you know, it was a like I kind of mentioned in the video. I tried to kind of keep it more kind of gentler, but like it was the era of the white men basically, and a lot of people are just like, it's, you know, they kind of hate the Apollo era because all you see on the surface is the sea of white men, like. But at the same time, we sort of like, I find John Glenn to be such an interesting character because as much as he was a pilot, like a test pilot, like all 7 of the original Mercury astronauts were, he was the one who didn't have affairs and like didn't do anything untoward or seedy. He was just like the perfect American of the 1950s, form of like beautiful wife, 2 kids and a dog, and like went to church regularly and was just like the oldest of the group, but like has this cute little baby face. He's very good looking. Just like, you could not be more American and apple pie than John Glenn in the 1950s. And like for him to be also a war hero who was the first American in space, it's like, yeah, this is exactly who like America at the time needed to pin their hopes on for like beating the Soviet Union in the Cold War / space race incarnation of the Cold War. It's just such everyone I know who's met him just says that's not a way that we looked at him and like whitewashed his past. It's not like we're ignoring things about him to sort of have this opinion that he was just such a great like American hero. It's like, no, everyone I know is just like, no, he was just a really, really great person. Yeah. Like all he did was serve his country. It's like, yeah, you don't get people like that. That is a rare breed, I think, of just this, like, I am exactly what you see, and what you see is just an upstanding, really good person. And it's like, yeah, that's John Glenn. And I think that's what people need to remember instead of, like, trying to be like, yeah, he was great, but now we have diversity. It's like, yeah, of course diversity is, like, the best thing ever. Yeah. But, like, let's also look at this guy and be like, no, he, in his era, he was who America needed. He was like the perfect hero in 1959.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's just so good to hear that there were people like that, and he was pretty progressive as well. So, yeah, you like you said, from the military to space to a senator, quite a story to behold for sure. Sort of getting back to the history aspect of it, Amy, you came out with a book that really stretched our space history muscles. Could you tell us a little bit about breaking the chains of gravity and how long it took you to write this massive beast? I loved it. I am learning things that, being who I am in the UFO field, I should
need
know.
You to write a blurb on my paperback now for that.
Yeah, well, you did the same for my book, so you let me know when the second edition comes out. But I had no idea that there was spaceflight before NASA, and that shows how ignorant I actually am about space history and exploration. So, tell us a little about the book, how the idea was sparked to write this, and how long did it take you?
we're in the field of space-ish.
Ish.
No, the idea came, I mean, like I kind of said with my decision to unceremoniously turn my back on academia, I was just so sick of like finding all these amazing things in space and realizing that nobody knew the stories because they're sort of kept within the academic world. And the people who do have an interest in them don't really go outside that. So like every once in a while you'll see an article on like Wired or something with some weird space thing, but like there's not a lot that exists in like trade publications for the general public to get them excited and curious about things that, you know, we kind of take space for granted. And the more I started doing research in my master's and stuff, I sort of got into this like prehistory of NASA, as I call it, and just thought, this is so interesting. And I'm a huge space nerd, and I'm just finding out about this. Mm-hmm. That's not okay. Like, as an historian, I'm a big fan of like, we should know our roots before we go forward because that ultimately helps us not repeat mistakes and do better things, right? So I really wanted to tell the story of the roots of NASA because I think for our generation, just because we didn't grow up with NASA in the same way that our parents and grandparents did, right? Like it was established. You and I are both shuttle babies, if you will. And like spaceflight was sort of, you know, it's weird to think that we've lived in a world where people have always been in space. Yeah. If you think about it. But I thought it was, you know, for our generation especially, like people kind of take it for granted and are like, why are we not doing this yet? If we can go to the moon, why can't we do this? It's like, well, let's actually look at how recent spaceflight is and how hard it is. And that the fact that NASA didn't like pop out of nothing and just like magically go to the moon. There's no space magic. You know, the roots were there for decades and you're building off this stuff. So I wanted to write something that would be accessible for people who aren't giant space nerds. Like it's just a history book. There's very few numbers in there and one number that is a giant typo. Yeah, I know. I get emails once a week about the speed of the X-15. It's not 8.7 million miles per hour.
Well, darn it.
Yeah, that's a correction for the next edition. It's in with my publisher. But yeah, no. So I wanted to write this to kind of get this story out. It's so inspirational and so interesting for the general public. So it was sort of born out of my master's thesis a little bit. Actually, the original idea for the book, which I'm sure you can understand, like when you decide to write a book, how many incarnations the idea goes through. Yeah. So the original book was like much bigger in scope. And I actually had this very odd thing happen where an editor from Norton Liverlight emailed me and was like, I can't acquire titles, but I love your work and I want to help you. So I just like, you know, informational interview, like we talked. And I was actually, I think the last time I was in New York, I had lunch with him. I was there for a writer's conference. And I had lunch with him, and he proceeded to tell me that my idea was too big, to break it in half at the creation of NASA. Well, I was just like, well, that's the only place to logically do it and like make it 2 parts. He's like, yeah, and then just like start with one and then do the other and like you're fine. And then he ate off my plate and then I never saw him again. It was the greatest. He's in my thank yous actually, because that was the most impactful lunch ever. But yeah, so once I kind of broke it in half, it was just like, well, that's smaller, that's easier. And then it was just like, you know, 2 years of researching, and then my publisher came to me, which was nuts. And I think I wrote the bulk of the book, like the bulk of it probably in like 8 months. Wow. Which is the scary part. Because at the same, like, yeah, I signed a contract for 2 years from contract to delivery. Mm-hmm. Fine. But then I like broke off an engagement and moved across the country by myself in that time span. So like that was a lot of things that was happening in my life. And it's just like, oh, I have to write a book now. So like literally I like landed in LA and I was like, all right, I've got 8 months. Yep, wow. Let's not leave the house.
Right.
So at least like, you know, I had bits and pieces done. It was just a matter of like actually doing it and like making it sound good. And, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that is quite a story about how the book came to be. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, Amy, I mean, this is a UFO podcast, and I'm sure our listeners are getting a little anxious. I have to ask you, what are your thoughts on the UFO phenomenon? You've had to have heard some pretty weird stories from astronauts or members of, NASA about sightings in space. Are there any that come to mind right now that you found of personal interest?
There's 2 that always come to mind when I think of UFOs. The first, and this is actually one that I was asked about recently, so there is a video coming, is the transient lunar phenomena, which was like this weird, there's a report about it that came out in about 1958. that's looking at odd light and color phenomena on the moon. And in the 50s, when no one knew whether this was like a naturally occurring thing, whether they knew the moon had no atmosphere, so like what could these lights be? Might it be aliens? These have been recorded for centuries. Like I think this report goes back to like the 1600s with these weird light and color flashes on the moon. And just because this became such an issue for NASA when it was like a newborn institution of like, what do we do if these transient lunar phenomena turn out to be aliens on the moon? That's one that I always look to is like, this is pretty interesting. And maybe that's more alien and not UFO. And I'm sorry, in my head, I kind of put them together because...
we do it all the time, don't we?
Okay, because I was just going to say, because my other favorite UFO story, you know the story of Apollo 20?
Yeah.
I feel like you and I may have been in the same documentary talking about this at one point. But
I think so.
Yeah, Apollo 20... Okay, just for the record, is not a thing that happened. I'm not saying that it happened, but it is the story that people actually, like, I don't know how this makes the rounds on the internet with such regularity, but apparently on Apollo 20, it was a joint U.S.-Soviet mission to the moon, and they used the command service module and lunar modules, somehow, to pick an alien ship up off the far side of the moon that was first found in orbital photographs from, I believe, Apollo 15. And inside that is an alien that they bring back to life. That's my favorite because I don't even know where the roots of that story are.
How it happened. Yeah, that's...
How does that even... Because there's the best thing about it is that there's footage online. Like, who was able to film something with a fake mission patch and a weird hybrid American-Soviet flag in what looks very much like a lunar module. And also, like, it has the same look as, like a 16-millimeter Hasselblad. Like, it looks like the old footage. It's so weird. It's one of my favorites because it's just, like, I don't understand where this comes from. Yeah. Those aren't very good answers because I don't really do a lot of UFO things. Every time I talk to astronauts about like the strangest thing you saw, they always have the very scientific answer of, well, we saw a flashing light and then realized that it was like a panel that had blown off when we released the lunar module or whatever. And It was spinning and then it was just catching the light as it spun. So it looked like a flashing light. It looked like it was trailing us, but really it was just on the same trajectory as us.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, yeah, we do hear that a lot, and we need that scientific methodology to keep things straight and separate the UFO phenomenon from aliens. So I think that's the best way to go about it. Well, you brought up, Amy, the moon. I wanted to talk a little about that. Why do you personally think, with your historical knowledge of going to the moon, why haven't we been back there? And do you think it's worth still exploring?
I'm just rubbing my fingers together in the emotion of money right now.
Okay.
There's just no money for it.
Okay.
I think that's kind of really why we haven't come back to the moon. Apollo started losing funding like almost immediately after Apollo 11 landed. And even before funding was going down, it was just not something that was viable. And there's never really been it's just never been something that we can really do without having a reason to do it, like fighting another country, because we need war-type funding to make a program like that happen. So unless spaceflight becomes actually cost-effective and we develop a system that actually keeps the cost down, I can't imagine we'll have a way to go to the moon and have any kind of presence there. It's just not something that humans are quite ready for, I don't think. As for whether we should go to the moon, I think there's definitely scientific reasons to do it. I'm more on team science than team inspiration when it comes to spaceflight. I think there's definitely reasons to go to the moon. It's just a question of, are those reasons strong enough now, or should we maybe wait, 50 years, 100 years until we actually have better technology and a better understanding of how to keep humans alive in areas like the moon where there's no shielding from radiation, to actually be effective workers.
Yeah.
I'm kind of on the fence there of is there a reason to be doing this stuff now versus working on developing the technology and understanding about these different environments more, so that when we get humans there, and we do need to get humans there, we can do it right.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's sort of where the whole idea of private space exploration comes in. Where do you stand on that whole proponent of private corporations getting involved in the whole new space race, as it were?
Yeah. New space.
New space. Let's hashtag that now.
Well, people keep referring to it as like, new space versus old space. I'm like, it's all kind of old space. But I'm bummed. I think it's good to have different innovation from different companies. And the one benefit that a private company has over government is that like a private company can kind of do what it wants. It can spend as much money as it wants. It can develop what it wants. It can kill people if it wants, to be totally honest, without having to go through a huge review. I mean, there would obviously be an inquiry, but like, if Elon Musk wants to put people on rockets and they sign up privately, you're taking a risk. If NASA does it, as we've seen with the shuttle disasters, it's a long process of inquiry and fixing or not fixing things. But yeah, it's that you can take more risks when you're a private company. My thing with it is like, how much are these private companies doing it for reasons that like, Elon Musk is doing this because he wants to go to Mars. Okay, so what's the greater scheme here? Like you're basically doing like a fast, like the Apollo era crash program of we want to get to Mars now, as opposed to, well, let's really understand the challenges and work on developing the things. And maybe we don't know enough to go to Mars yet, which is my own opinion. The other thing is like with private companies, they're private, so they don't have to tell me what they're doing. So when Elon Musk says, yes, I have this plan to send 100 people to Mars and this, and I will release no technical details or any firm mission plans. I'm like, so why should I take this seriously if I don't get to see what you're talking about?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, I think at some point the ultimate like happy place, and this is like, that scene in The Simpsons where they're like, well, imagine a world without lawyers, and everyone's like holding hands and singing there's rainbows. Like, this is my vision for spaceflight, is that like international governments and private contractors work together so that there's no duplication of technology.
Right.
Because I can't help but see like the Falcon Heavy and the insane, 42 engine behemoth, and also the SLS in its heavy configuration. Like, these are all just heavy lift vehicles. Instead of developing 3 of them, why don't we focus on 1 of them?
Good point.
I again, because of SpaceX, I don't really know what the benefits are over NASA. It's hard because you can't see it all. But I'd love to see them all working together for something that's like a unifying space program.
You and me both.
And also holding hands, singing with rainbows.
With rainbows, yeah. Well, as we've seen, The Simpsons have gotten a lot of things right in the past.
Oh my God, I know.
10 years or so, which is a little terrifying. But moving on. Well, in terms of like exoplanets being discovered and, things like Proxima b, do you believe there's any hope of finding life out there, even within like our own galaxy, Amy?
Are we putting a time frame on that? Like hope of finding alien life in our lifetime?
Let's say within our lifetime. Or just generally? Let's say within our lifetime.
I think within our lifetime, I won't give away either of our ages, but within our lifetime, I don't know that we would find life form of like intelligent life that could communicate with us. I think it's more likely, just given the state of technology, that we would find like confirmed biosignatures of life somewhere, but we have no way right now, without some like massive leap in technology, of actually going there and making any kind of contact. Right. I mean, that's in the relatively nearer future. But as for like and the other part of that is like, what kind of life might there be? I think there's definitely life out there somewhere. I don't necessarily think that there's life out there that wants to enslave humanity like all the science fiction movies show. Yeah. I think it's more likely that we would find a primitive life. Because also, like, what people always forget, and you, of course, would not forget this, is that, like, when you're looking at exoplanets, you're also looking back in time, right? So we have to find life on that planet in the moment where it exists. Because it might be that we're seeing it after a mass extinction. Yeah, right. And we might be just missing the life, which is why I think that like we could find sure evidence of past life, but not necessarily like a thriving society. So yeah, I think the odds of finding just given that we're looking back in time, we have to find these planets at the right time in their history to support life. I think it's harder to find life like us life, but probably more likely that we'd be able to find like a more basic form of life in the nearer future, just because I imagine, and I should say I am not an exobiologist in any way, I imagine that's probably more prevalent
that seems very, safe to say. I mean, obviously, we have to take many things into consideration, space, time, communication. We saw a lot of this in the new movie Arrival. How much language would play a big part of this, and like you said, like we're almost looking into the past if we were to find that life. So, it's fascinating. It's definitely something to ponder. Hopefully within our lifetime. Again, if the Simpsons have everything right, hopefully we will.
Or we'll find Mr. Burns drugged up and glowing from radiation in the forest. Either way, I'll take either one.
I have so many friends you would get along with in terms of being a Simpsons fan. I'll have to get you connected with them. Well, this question comes straight from your co-host, which we'll get to in a little bit, Amy. Jason. He felt really bad he couldn't be here today. He's a busy man. His question to you is, if you could journey through the solar system on a kick-ass spaceship and you were searching for extraterrestrial life, where would you go, and what one person would you want to be with you? And this could be anyone, a scientist, an Apollo astronaut. How's that one for a hypothetical?
The destination is the easy part. I would go to Titan, Saturn's moon Titan, in like a party ship. There would be a bar on board. Titan I think is such an interesting place, and to be totally honest, I'm so sick of exploring Mars. I want more money for missions to places like Titan, because Titan is the moon that has what scientists suspect is a very similar environment to primordial Earth, and is actually a really good candidate for potentially having, if not life, the right environment for life to start up. Also, I really, really want to see what it looks like with Saturn on the horizon. That would just be amazing. I think Titan's such a fascinating world that we have not explored nearly enough, and I'm so curious to get a deep look there. The other candidate would be Triton, Neptune's moon, because there is growing evidence after the New Horizons mission to Pluto that Pluto and Triton are actually like bodies, and they were both captured by Neptune. One became a moon, and one became a dwarf planet, if you will, orbiting in resonance with Neptune. I would love to see if those two things are actually very similar. So cool. Those are the two. As for the one person to go with, I have no idea. You sent me these questions last night, and I haven't been able to think of one person. I'm just what? I kind of just want a human with all the qualities that you need, a calming presence, but a very intimate knowledge of The Simpsons, but also a medical degree, and also be a mechanic and engineer so you can fix things when they break.
Yeah. Well, and we forget you're going to be with this person for a pretty freaking long time.
And then I think of, who could I put up with that long? And the only person I can think of is Pete, my cat.
Hey, we've put animals into space before. We can do it again.
We've put animals in space. We know cats don't like zero gravity, but I have absolutely no idea what one person I would want to spend that much time with and go that far with. I think eventually you'll pretty much want to kill anybody.
Yep. Mission failed, I guess. Yeah. In terms of that, but poor moons. They never get enough love.
Don't get enough love.
I'm glad you said that.
The distant moons are the coolest bodies.
Yeah.
They have some of the neatest stuff going on. I mean, yes, I don't know how to do it, but if we could have a mission that orbits Saturn and then deploys things to different moons and still talks to itself, that would be so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. More money for that, please.
More money for that, indeed. So you recently started a podcast, am I correct? You're joining us in the podcastosphere?
I did, yeah. I'm launching my own, the Vintage Space podcast, because I'm super creative by using the same name for all of my things. It's called
branding people.
But I did one episode and wasn't happy with it. And have since come up with a way better approach to the podcast. And I'm actually really excited. And I'm just dragging my heels at actually recording it again because I'm still not good at the technical aspects of it. So the podcast, and this is weird because I haven't told anybody that I'm doing it this way yet. So you'll be the first.
Oh, exclusive.
Yeah, I was just chatting with a couple friends of mine who are avid podcasters. The problem with me doing a podcast is I don't listen to podcasts because I'm super visual, and if I'm just hearing something, I won't hear it. So it's hard for me to think of how to do a podcast right. And a friend of mine was like, well, serialized podcasts are really big. And I was like, oh my God, is there a podcast that like does installments of the space race history? Because every mission or every like event could be a 30-minute podcast.
Right.
And I just like, I'm going to try that.
Awesome.
That's the elevator pitch. That's very bad. But I've started sketching out like how many episodes I could do, and then just sort of go back and like look specifically at other things if this thing actually does like gain enough traction. Like I don't even know how to think of things in like a serialized way of doing seasons. Like that's not how my brain works, because I'm not good at planning things on the long term like that. But yeah, it was just like, so I'm actually going to try this approach of like, let's actually just take one technology and tell that story and see if I can do like have characters that bleed over, so that like in half-hour installments every 2 weeks or whatever, you learn a little bit more, that you have a bigger understanding of this era of history that is so boiled down in modern retellings that like, yeah, let's see if that works. Who knows? I have no idea. The podcast, like talk about like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, like podcast. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm doing. I am just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that something sticks.
Well, you're throwing something else at the wall, right? What is this thing you are doing with our co-host Jason McClellan? This is going to be a Rogue Planet podcast.
Yeah.
I know you, Jason, and I have very similar interests in terms of music and obviously space. So what is this? What is this amalgamation you two have come up with?
This is the greatest. This is the podcast that I'm actually excited about, because this started actually like as a joke in an email. Okay. When I think I put on Twitter that I was looking at podcasts, and Jason emailed me and was like, if you have questions about gear, I can help you. And then we started just like joke talking about doing a podcast that was all about punk, ska, beer, space, and pets, because these are like the 5 things that we both like love unconditionally. Right. And then it actually grew into a thing that we were like, we could actually make this happen, and it could actually be kind of awesome, because between the two of us, we know a lot of people in these fields, and we want to have you on. We want to just like chat and drink beer and just get nerdy about all of these things. So it is called the Punk Rocker Moon Stomper Podcast. Jason has designed an amazing logo for it that I can't wait to turn into patches and buttons. And honestly, like what it is, I mean, Jason. And we, he's just awesome. So basically what we do is we crack a beer and we talk for an hour.
Yeah.
And it's wherever, we did our first episode, and it is a very long introduction to these 5 elements of the podcast, and also ourselves, so that people get to know us. But it was just like, it's so much fun to sit and hang out with someone that you have that much in common with, that you get to just catch up with on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and just like have a beer over the internet. It's like, it's the funnest thing ever. And yeah. I can't wait to actually start releasing it into the wild. It is going to be a Rogue Planet podcast, and I'm going to host the video version on my new YouTube channel that's more personal. And we're just going to kind of really like hope that this thing picks up steam, but we're both really, really excited about taking this on.
Yeah, absolutely. And these things intermingle more than we think they do.
More than you would think. Yeah.
Like we interviewed a gentleman who wrote a book about punk rock and UFOs. So yeah, it's definitely, cracking that beer, just letting loose. People like that. They like hearing people have conversations. They feel like they're in the room and they can be a part of it. And I think that's where your video aspect will really come in. So I'm super excited to hear that when it drops, and I can't wait to come on and crack a Guinness or something with you guys. Yeah. Maybe a whiskey. Yeah. That's
we're
my
not,
drink of choice.
We will never tell you what to drink or tell you that you have to drink, but you are welcome to drink whatever you want and as much as you want. Yeah, I had a beer that was like 9% when we were doing our first episode, and I was like, wow, this is good. This is good.
This is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Awesome. Well, Amy, what's next for you? Are you doing any talks or conventions, or are you working on any new books? We've sort of covered the video aspect. What's next for you?
All the things.
All of the things. Okay.
Aside from the 2 podcasts, I am working on pitching my next book right now. It's just been, you've written a book.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's just kind of honing the proposal down to like the right sellable thing for my agents, and then hoping that they see what I see in it, and just kind of going from there. It's just like I just need time to work on it. So that's like my big next baby. Continuing on with the YouTube thing, but I'm also launching, I just kind of mentioned it, a second channel, basically a personal kind of vlog style channel, just to showcase that, as we talked earlier, that nerds come in all shapes and sizes and genders and everything, that I want to start showcasing or sharing a little bit of like what life is like when you are a super nerd living largely on the internet, doing all kinds of crazy things, who has multiple interests. Because for everybody that says, I want my daughter to love science when she starts wanting to date, you also, I keep telling these parents, like, but also let her do other things, because you need her to be well-rounded and like actually love this stuff and not force her into it.
Right.
I get a lot of questions from parents and teachers. It's so weird. And I'm like, oh, I don't have kids, nor do I educate children, but I can try to help. So it's just, I think it's important to sort of look at the other side of things and have I have no idea. This is like the big social experiment of 2017. So those are the next like big creative things. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that will be very inspirational to a lot of young women out there to not feel like you need to follow a certain path or mold that sort of this society is carved out for them. So that's super exciting. Where can we find out more about all these amazing things you're going to be doing?
You can, the best place to probably follow me is Twitter, because I tweet everything that's happening. My handle is AST Vintage Space. And also my main YouTube channel is also going to have all the announcements and stuff on it. That's just Vintage Space. Google it and you'll find it. It's nice to be up in the search rankings, so I don't have to give you a very long URL.
That's fair enough. And the book is available on Amazon, I would assume?
Oh, yeah. I should also talk about the fact that you can buy my book, because it's been out for a year. It's available on Amazon, Breaking the Chains of Gravity. And also, if you do want a signed hardcover edition, I sell them on my website, which is just amyshirateitel.com. Shipping times are slow, I will warn you, depending on if I have books in my house or not. But I do for Christmas right now, so get your orders in.
You were my biggest inspiration for that. I started doing the same. I totally stole it from you, and it's cool. It's cool, like thinking.
Is it working out for you?
It's going well. Yeah.
It's sort of super annoying, isn't it?
It's annoying in the way that like the postal service isn't really your friend when you need them to be. But
that's what I mean. Like, I love that people want to buy it from me, and I love doing it. It's really nice to people will send me like, oh, is this for my daughter? Can you inscribe it? I'm like, yes, this is great. But it's also like I live with boxes of shipping supplies and boxes of books, and like I'm just not like I need a staff. Like I need an intern to like be my book manager right now. Just that's the annoying part is like, oh my God. And USPS like hates me because of how many international orders they take forever to ship.
Yeah.
Like every time I walk into the post office with like 15 books, they look at me, they're like, oh, it's you. Like literally they look at me and they're like, you have to wait. I'm like, no, it's the post office. It's first come, first served. They're like, you have to wait because we don't want to do this.
We don't want to do this. Civil service jobs, they can do what they want.
Oh my God. It was, I finally figured out how to do the internationals online and they are so happy.
Oh, good. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an amazing conversation. I know our listeners will totally dig the whole space aspect, and it's good to know that you're still open to the possibilities of what may be out there. So, thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you again so much for having me. It's been fun.
Alright, that's it for this week's episode. Again, you can follow Amy on Twitter, @Shira Teitel. And be sure to subscribe to her YouTube channel at youtube.com/vintagespace. While you're at it, subscribe to our growing YouTube channel as well at youtube.com/Ryan Sprague. We're on Twitter @SomewhereSkies and Instagram @SomewhereSkiesPod. The official Somewhere in the Sky store is open, so go check out some of the new designs we've got over there, and be sure to grab our #1 seller, the official Hynek design. Represent our UFO dad in style, while watching the latest episodes of Project Blue Book on the History Channel. Visit tpublic.com and search for the Somewhere in the Sky store. Again, that's teepublic.com. Support us on Patreon for rewards at patreon.com/SomewhereSkies. Thank you as always to the eOne Podcast Network HelloFresh, KGRA Radio, and most importantly, to you for listening. I'll see you here next week, and remember, keep your feet on the ground, but never stop searching somewhere in the skies.
Somewhere in the Skies is produced by Third Kind Productions in association with the Entertainment One Podcast Network. To learn more, visit entertainmentonepodcast.com.